The Democratic Party, if they win this election, almost certainly set to fracture.
He will struggle to appease those in his own party, never mind the broader electorate.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Political. My name's Connor Allen and I'm here with Ryan Smith, and today we're going to be talking about Black Lives Matter. Of course, everybody knows that protests have been sweeping across the US for the past few months. Originally born from protests against police brutality, the radical left has hijacked these protests and imposed their own agenda upon them. Instead of the peaceful protests for the safety of black people, we now see white liberals trapping policemen in buildings, setting fire to them in Portland, government-free communes across America, and demands for the redistribution for wealth. Not all black people are happy about this, are they?
No, they're not. And just jump straight into the article we've got here. Former Princeton professor Carol Swain was on Fox News. This was yesterday, well, it was a few days ago now at this point. She was talking to Fox News, talking about her view on the whole Black Lives Matter situation. It's always good to... You don't often see someone, a conservative, you certainly don't often see... I don't know if she's a self-proclaimed conservative, but African-American conservatives going on the mainstream media and calling out and talking about that conservative viewpoint of the whole situation when it comes to the Black Lives Matter. So it is. And
they have been painted over, haven't they? Black conservatives have been completely ignored throughout the protests.
Oh yeah, because it's very convenient for Democrats to pretend they don't exist, right? Because I mean, in Joe Biden's opinion, they're not even black. Right, so
exactly. Black's the homogenous group. Yeah,
exactly. So Carol Swain, she was a former professor at Princeton, so this is the prestigious college.
She's not a random Joe off the street. She's quite intelligent. You can expect a bit of nuance to her views.
Exactly, and you'd like to think that she has. Although having said that, listen, I've heard a lot of professors from these liberal campuses spewing a lot of stuff, so let's not jump straight into that argument from authority logic. So, but yeah, she was on Fox News. She was talking about Black Lives Matter, more specifically how it's become intertwined with the Democratic campaign, shall we say, with the election coming up. So she was saying that Democrats are using black people to advance a political agenda that will be destructive to our nation. And in other words, it's not a civil rights organization, it's a political organization. And I think that's kind of the argument, that's the view that a lot of people talk about. This, how is this about police brutality? How is it about this one particular cause?
And I think the majority of America now believes this. You know, we've seen 3-4 months of protests, of riots, of ever increasing violence. And it's just simply not about... If you look at Black Lives Matter 4 months ago, people were protesting quite justly against police brutality and quite justly for the safety of black people. And now they're calling for all sorts of redistribution of wealth, the deleting of parts of history they don't agree with. It's just wrong, isn't it? It's snowballed, it's blossomed into something that's completely unrecognizable, and America recognizes it.
Yeah, certainly. I think the Democrats thought this is a good thing to get behind. They always are, I guess, in conjunction with a lot of the mainstream media, want to kind of start stoking the fires of these racial tensions every time it's election season, because it's something that it's a narrative that they can push and go on and try and use as a political tool, a stick to beat Trump with, or I guess just Republicans in general, but certainly more so with Trump, you know. And
you see this more than ever within the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party. It's so particularly concentrated within those people, isn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely, because it just suits, it perfectly matches up with the identity politics version. Well, yeah, that version of politics that they have. That's how they kind of enthuse their base. That's how they get people rallied up. In the words of Carol Swain herself, she likens the Black Lives Matter movement to a cultural Marxist agenda against America. They're using it to using black people to advance a radical agenda that will be destructive to our nation, that will hurt all of us, and it's hurting us right now.
What do you think she means by cultural Marxist? Because when I hear that phrase, I kind of picture to myself the Cultural Revolution and Mao Zedong and these kind of attempts to, just kind of delete history and change history and reshape the way people think. Is it what she's trying to say? Or?
Well, I think the link that that's being made there is when we're talking about Marxism, it's this idea of classes, the serfs being oppressed, and when you look at identity politics in the radical left now, in the Democratic Party, they want to put everyone in this group, this identity, you're black, you're Hispanic, whatever, and just by virtue of being black or whatever, you are oppressed, and that's the way it is,
definitely.
And there's nothing you can do about it.
These people, they don't believe in successful black people. They don't believe in successful minorities. And as we both know, incredibly successful, entrepreneurial, intelligent minorities, and they're just completely papered over, ignored by these people. And for these people, their mere existence is a paradox.
Well, I think, listen, and going back to the link with the Democratic Party and how they're using this. So, the article here mentions that the founder, or is it the co-founder of the Black Lives Matter, went on CNN, proclaimed that the goal of Black Lives Matter was to get Trump out, and at that point, basically admitting that this isn't some cultural movement or it's not a movement about social justice, or it's not a movement about police brutality or systemic racism. It's a political movement. It's a movement to get Trump out. And obviously,
it's so ridiculous, isn't it? It's just
it's election season. It's time to start stoking the flames of racism and all this racial justice and the racial divide in America, and create this tension, whip up this tension.
So immoral, isn't it? So immoral to take millions of people protesting because they want black people to be safe. Black people want to be safe from the police. They want to know if they are stopped by the police, their lives are safe. The integrity of their body is maintained. Of course, if there's anything, no one agrees with police brutality. They don't want to participate in a grand movement to get Trump out, all these things that white liberals have tacked onto it. It's so ridiculous what they're doing. It's so immoral to take a legitimate cause and to subvert it to your own ends.
I think it's a real difficult line to tread in terms of what your opinion on this is, because on one side, I think, the media can report whatever they want, right, in whatever form they want, however they want. But at the same time, you almost feel as though there has to be some accountability for what they do, because when they're creating this racial divide, they're whipping up this hysteria about systemic racism, inflating the issue, making it seem like it's bigger than it actually is. Because if we take a scientific approach to this and we say, well, let's have a look at the statistics, what's going on, racism, or at least systemic racism is a widespread issue, right? By definition, it's something that's happening institutionally, right? So if that existed in America, then you think there would be real significant evidence to support that quantitative evidence that says, hey, look, there's racism in all the institutions in America, in all the federal institutions, state institutions, whatever, the police, the law and justice, education. But the only evidence that they have, and this isn't, I'm not, when I'm trying to find out the answers here, I'm really just seeking for the truth. And you're not finding the truth if you take one, variable analysis and say, well, how many black people are killed in America by the police, and think that that's some kind of proof that there's systemic racism. You'd have to have a multivariable analysis. You have to look at all of the different moving parts in play. And when you take those things into account, it is far from conclusive. And don't get me wrong, like there will be some elements of racism in the police, in the judicial systems. There'll be judges that are prejudiced. There'll be police officers that are prejudiced. All of these things are going to exist. But if you try and make out the problem like it's bigger than it is, that it's just this big bogeyman that can never be defeated, then I just think it distracts from the real fights that can go on, which is when you take these cases where you can clearly prove and say, this is an act of prejudice, this is wrongdoing that's happened here, let's fight it, because everyone will rally behind that.
This is what's important as well. It's the definition of racism, isn't it? Because we're coming at this from an angle of racism means you have a problem with black people, or you have a problem with a minority group, which is kind of what racism is. But these people, if you speak to a radical leftist, they'll tell you that all white people are racist, and they're born racist because they profit from systemic inequality as they define it. Even though when you ask them, okay, what proof is there of systemic equality? Arguments kind of fall apart. But from these people's perspective, all white people are the bad guys from day one, and it's just not racism, is it? It's just these bizarre fantasies of self-hate and they really hate that they're American. They hate that they're white, and I don't know. What do you think of that?
Well, I think, speaking of that, I think that really manifests itself when we're talking about the monuments, right? And just this fascination now with tearing down anything that has some indirect link to colonialism, or this person once made this quote, that is now deemed racist. And it's like, of course, right? Because things are different then. And we have progressed, we've progressed socially, in terms of social justice.
It's important to look at where we came from so we can judge our society now against the societies of the past and say to ourselves, yeah, we've got better.
Yeah, certainly. And exactly, it's the argument of, well, you're trying to erase history, right? Well, history needs to be there as a reminder. I mean, I don't want to go into all the platitudes. Well, if you're
a kid growing up and you don't know because you've never seen it, basically, when you reduce history to lines in textbooks, you delete history because no one remembers. Think about, unless you're a professional historian, you probably don't remember every single little line of the history book that you memorized 20 years ago when you were in school, do you? So when you delete all those symbols and monuments, and you delete any trace of these people apart from the history book, you delete so much educational material, and you delete so many ways that you can look at the past and be revolted by it. Because some of the things they say were revolting, of course. Slave traders are revolting, but we need to see them, we need to see who they are, and we need to criticize them.
Exactly. They're revolting from a contemporary lens. And if you can't look back and see the movement that's been... I mean, that to me is a very... to be kind of philosophical for a moment, that's an inherent part of being human, is to look back upon where we have been and look where we are now and see that line of progress, because it gives you some kind of hope and belief that, hey, humanity is actually on the right track here. I'm kind of paraphrasing Data from Star Trek. There's like a scene where he's talking about, they say, well, they're asking him, why do humans keep old buildings around? And he's basically sort of like thinking it through, and he's like, well, because if they have old buildings around, it reminds them of what they once were, and it gives them this sense of progress. And it is the same principle. But we're kind of missing that wider point, and we've discussed this before. It's not up to an angry mob or an angry crowd to decide which statues get to stay up and which statues are pulled down.
No,
it's up to the people of that community. This, if you hold democracy, if you hold these liberal values true to heart, then you will believe in the process of the people of that community deciding what they do with their own public property. It's up to them. It's not for an angry mob.
And I would like to see. Okay, so if their justification for a mob tearing down a statue because they're not particularly a fan of the history, what if the wind turns, and what if the wind's blown in a different direction and it's suddenly a crowd of 10,000 white nationalists marching, tearing down statues of Abraham Lincoln, because they've set the precedent, haven't they? They've set the precedent that it's okay for a small mob, and I say small in relation to the size of the community that they're affecting, it's okay for them to tear down a statue of someone they don't like historically because they believe their morals to be more correct than other people's morals.
Exactly.
So if it's white nationalists, if it's neo-Nazis doing that, well, you have no moral leg to stand on.
Oh, definitely. This is absolutely typical of a sort of wider spread feeling among, I don't want to say like left-wing voters, because I still, believe it or not, consider myself somewhat liberal. I just feel abandoned by.
Really?
I just feel abandoned by. Yeah, I feel abandoned by all of the left-wing parties. Obviously, I live in the UK. I felt abandoned by Labour because they no longer stood for the things that I thought they stood for. They've gone completely astray.
When you have wealthy southern rich socialists telling northerners who've struggled against the economic system what they believe, it just makes no sense, does it? And it's that leftist arrogance that they know what's better. And if you're a poor person or if you're a minority, you're not entitled to your own opinion. God, no, you have to follow this rich, white, educated individual who's going to tell you what to think. And if you don't think that, well, Sonny Jim, you're out, you're excommunicated.
Yeah, exactly. You are an unfortunate. You are an uncomfortable. Like, we're uncomfortable with you people existing, so we're going to label you as a racist or a traitor or a bootlicker or whatever it is, whatever the trendy millennial slang is at the time.
I believe it's problematic at the moment.
Okay. So it's like, just going back to what you're saying, it's very typical of the left to basically justify the ends with the means because of this feeling of moralistic superiority. Like, what we believe is the righteous, it is the virtuous thing, you are wrong, so it's okay. It's one rule for us, it's another rule for you. So like you say, some white supremacists start tearing down statues of whoever, then the precedent has been set, like you said.
And I think it's so important that you use the words righteous and virtuous, because it's very religious, isn't it? They have a great moral truth, and their moral truth is greater than all other moral truths. It's the same as saying, my God is better than all other gods, and therefore I have to kill you or convert you. These people, they effectively become religious zealots because they can't stop, because they see moral injustice everywhere in the world, no matter whether it's relevant or not. Why can't everyone just return to the centre, talk about these things openly, and stop screaming each other down, cancelling each other, and setting fire to things? Is that too much to ask for?
Well, apparently so. Yeah.
Apparently so. Yeah.
Do you see a way? I mean, how do you see a way back from here? Right, because let's say, in some mad, bizarro world, enough people vote for Biden for him to become president. let's say,
the most likely scenario.
The world has gone insane, right? Or America's gone. Let's say America goes insane. They vote in Biden. Does that appease the crowd then? Do you think they stop there, or do they keep going?
No, it's going to cause more factions, because if you look at Biden's voter base, it's very fractured between the kind of Sanders voters who've been coddled into supporting him and these so-called progressives who are voting against Trump but not for Biden. He has to somehow unite those radicals with the centrist voters who voted for him, and also he has to govern for the Republican voters or people who voted for Donald Trump as well. Has this work cut out for him?
So when Biden says, "Hey, I'm the president that is going to unite the country back together again," do you not feel that's kind of hard to believe? I don't even feel like you can unite the people in your own party, never mind the country.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a hard ask, and he's getting old. Let's face it. The Trump campaign have often come out against him for his perceived lack of mental capacity. I'm just thinking to myself now, I might seem a bit distracted because I'm thinking, well, what if something, God forbid, happens to President Biden and it's President Harris? Because she doesn't have a chance in hell of uniting the nation, I don't think. I like the woman, I respect her, but
I think it may even be possible that Harris is even more hated than Trump. I mean, there are some left-wing voters out there who hate Harris more than they hate Trump because of her record.
Well, I don't think, at the moment you compare them, they'll hate Trump more. But, what about 3 years into a Biden presidency? And they've stopped hating Trump because he was, yesterday's news. And now they have to turn their rage against someone else. And as we were saying before, it's essentially a form of religious zealotry. Who do they turn their righteous anger on? Well, it's going to be their own party, isn't it?
Oh well, this is it. They've created this angry mob. Can they control the mob? Can they contain the mob? I don't think so. So all this talk of, oh, I'm going to come and unite the country, I'm the president that we need, I don't really believe it, because
easier said than done, isn't it?
Yeah, I think all that's going to happen here, and just because Biden's platform right now, he hasn't come out and openly said, "Oh, I support defund the police" and that kind of thing. I think he has tried to distance himself a little bit from that. But if he gets elected, I don't know if that's going to stay that way, right? Because there will be pressure on him or that administration, whoever it is that's in charge, to appease this angry mob that they've created. No, go on.
And not just with President Biden as well, because eventually you have midterms, you have all these representatives, you have all these senators who suddenly have to decide, are they going to toe the party line, or, are they going to pander to the progressives? Are they going to define themselves in opposition to Joe Biden's centrism? If the Democratic Party, if they win this election, almost certainly set to fracture.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And when we're talking about coming out of a pandemic, and we're talking about Trump says rebuilding the economy, and bringing those jobs back, I have zero faith in a Biden administration. He will struggle to appease those in his own party, never mind the broader electorate. And this idea that the Democrats are going to be united together in policy, and they're going to, enact all this legislation that's going to build the economy back and bring the jobs back and bring America out this pandemic. I don't think so. I think it will be absolute chaos. And I think in many ways, this is something that Trump's missed on a little bit. This is a really good attack point that he can have towards the Democrats.
Absolutely, because
by highlighting the fractured coalition that exists within the left-wing party. Instead of just calling them all radical lefts, talk about how actually, no, this is a big fractured coalition, and if they got in power, it would be chaos.
Absolutely. Because what's the great thing that unites the Democratic Party? Donald Trump. What happens when he goes?
Yeah, and when he goes, exactly. So I don't know. I feel like
that's all we've got. That's all we've got time for. Thank you very much for listening, guys. Please do make sure to check out our social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and let us know in the comments below. We want to hear your opinion, and we want to respond to your opinion too. We want to build a community here. So tell us, what do you think of Black Lives Matter? What do you think of the radical leftist agenda?